Good morning. And good morning to those of you joining us online. Good morning. Let's take a deep breath together. One day during my last term at school, I walked out alone in the evening and heard the birds singing in that full chorus of song, which can only be heard at that time of year at dawn or at sunset. I remember now the shock of surprise with which the birds broke on this, with the sound broke on my ears. It seemed to me that I had never heard the birds singing before, and I wondered whether they sang like this all year round, and I had just never noticed. As I walked on, I came upon some hawthorn trees in full bloom, and again, I thought that I had never seen this sight or experienced such sweetness before. If I had been brought suddenly among the trees of the Garden of Paradise and heard a choir of angels singing, I could not have been more surprised. I came then to where the sun was setting over the playing fields. A lark rose suddenly from the ground beside the tree by which I had been standing and poured out a song above my head, and then sank still, singing to rest. Everything then grew still as the sunset faded and the veil of dusk began to cover the earth. I remember now feeling the awe which came over me. I felt inclined to kneel on the ground as though I had been standing in the presence of an angel. And I hardly dared to look on the face of the sky because it seemed as though it was but a veil before the face of God. That's a mystical experience that is recounted by Bede Griffiths, who was a Benedictine monk and who also embraced Hinduism. He really was a champion of interspirituality. And so this month, as we journey into Christmas and Hanukkah and the winter solstice and Kwanzaa, we are going to explore mysticism. Rather than talking about spirituality, we're just going to take a deep dive into it. You know? Ready to go? Okay, good. And we may not have an experience like Bede Griffiths, or we might. And some of you actually have already had some mystical experiences. Some of you have shared them with me. Right? I've shared mine with you, so I won't bore you again with that one. But anyway, we can all have our own version of awakening to the divine in everything. All right, so the book that I'm using to be inspired by, one of the books, is by Wayne Teasdale, The Mystic Heart. And in it, he says that mysticism can be both an experience, so a mystical experience like I just recounted, or it can be a process of spiritual living. So mystical spirituality. And that kind of involves practices, that lead us to a deeper understanding, a deeper experience. Those practices, kind of what we embrace here, And so a mystical experience is an event where we are so in the present moment that we become keenly aware of that eternal now. And that we see that eternal divine presence in everything. That we transcend our usual way of perceiving things. We go beyond our sense of separation, any kind of sense of duality, and we have an experience of transcendence. An experience of transcendence. It's usually brief, but it can have lasting effects. And men and women of all faiths throughout history have reported mystical experiences. So Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Sufism, Christianity, certainly indigenous cultures. have had, and very often they have something in common. They have this awareness, this sudden awareness of the eternal one in everything, of that transcendent one that is within and beyond everything. Sometimes for some it's associated with a deity. Some people have this close, intimate connection with Jesus or Mary or Krishna or whatever. But more often than not, it's sort of a universal experience of this divine energy that is within everything, this divine life energy. So this transcendent one that is within and beyond everything is kind of a good description of what we're going for, here in Unity. And the word that some people use for that is panentheism. Not pantheism. Pantheism is the belief that God is in everything, that that the divine is expressing in material form, but not necessarily beyond. Panentheism is the understanding that the entire planet, everything in it, all of us, and the entire universe exists within God, exists within the divine mind. That's that beautiful idea of that transcendent one that we are so much a part of, that we feel that we are in it. Right? So, you can say that Unity combines both the practical metaphysics. In other words, we have empowering tools that we can use in our everyday life to experience greater peace, greater love, greater experience of an abundant life. We have that. In fact, that's last month. We were really exploring the practical aspects of that and those tools that we can use to help, experience more of the fullness of who we are. And then we combine that with this mystical spirituality that goes beyond the practical aspects and gives us that experience of that transcendent one, that divine essence, that one non-dual essence. That feeds our soul. That feeds our soul. So, bringing together both the practical and the mystical is, I think, what makes Unity unique. Certainly what makes it highly appealing, certainly for me, maybe for you too. And this idea of interspirituality, which is the word that Bede Griffiths uses, or he used, he's now since passed on, but he describes it as the core essence from which all religions emerge. And I saw YouTube, he's again passed on, but hey, everybody lives eternally on YouTube. So I saw a YouTube video where he was using the analogy of his hand. And he said, okay, here are all the religions. Here's Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam and Christianity. And if you look at them from the from the outside, they all look different. And Hinduism is really far from Christianity. But if you go down into the center, this is the core of love from which all of these religions emerge. So, I think that's a really good term to use, interspirituality. And I would invite us to maybe change our language around this, because a lot of times we call ourselves interfaith, but but interfaith is more like the connection of religions as they're expressing now, when interspirituality is more getting to the essence of love. Sound good? You ready? We can shift that language. And, a few weeks ago in our community forum, we came together and you all shared some really wonderful ideas about how we could, this is always the challenge for us. How do we share what unity is to people who are not familiar. How many times have you said, oh yeah, I go to Unity Center of Peace, and people are like, what is that? Right? So we had this conversation, and a lot of you wrote it down, and I looked at all of those ideas. There's some really wonderful ideas that you shared, and I sort of synthesized them. I drew them together, and I came up with this, and see how it fits with you. Okay, so and I weaving this in with the interspirituality. So how is this? Unity Center of Peace is an interspiritual, loving community that combines both practical tools for helping us realize our full potential and mystic spirituality that awakens our soul. Like that? Good, right? I think that kind of completes it, right? If those of you online, if you have any other ideas, you like that, please, weigh in the comment section. Now, there is a little something there that I'm missing, and that's the idea about how we express that in the world. How do we shine that light? How do we share that in the world? So if you have an idea about how we can add that on there, I think that would be good. Okay, so let's talk about how we can open ourselves to this experience of a mystical experience. All right, so the first way I think that we can open the door is to cultivate wonder. To cultivate wonder. So Loveland-Coen, he's a, singer-songwriter of a generation, really. So one of the lyrics that he sang was, as our eyes grow accustomed to sight, they armor themselves against wonder. As our eyes grow accustomed to sight, they armor themselves against wonder. And, living in a physical three-dimensional world, we have to see clearly. We have to see clearly so we don't bump into anything, so we don't run anything over, God forbid. But it's this obsession with seeing clearly and naming everything and categorizing everything. We've got to put everything in a category. That impedes our understanding, our ability to see the divine in things, to see the magic in life. So Dana and I watched a movie this week, and I always go back to movies because it's part of my DNA. And it was called 3,000 Years of Longing. And you saw that. Okay. A little independent film. Tilda Swinton plays this scientist, this academic. She's very rational, and she goes around the world and lectures about how from the beginning of time that mankind, when they haven't understood the natural process of things, the scientific explanation of something, they made up, mythical creatures, mythical gods, creation stories, all that. And that's exactly what we did historically. And so she's very logical and rational and scientific about it. And she just happens to be in Istanbul doing one of her talks. And she goes into a shop that is in a side alley and goes into the back of this shop, and she's sort of looking around in the bins and what's in there, and she pulls out a bottle, sort of a misshapen bottle, and they can't understand why she would want this thing. But she goes back to her hotel room, and she is washing it off, rubbing it, yes. Out pops a genie. Or a djinn. She referred to it as a djinn, played by Idris Elba. Oh, yes. Rocked her world, right? It rocked her world. And so after a while, she began to realize that this kind of uber scientific stance she had was preventing her from seeing the magic, from experiencing the magic, from experiencing love. There's magic in everything if we look at it that way. Right? In the fall, the leaves turn a brilliant color that paints this gorgeous, colorful tableau that delights our eyes. In the winter, individually crafted snowflakes, no two alike, fall by the billions, laying this beautiful white blanket that creates this hush in the world. Sunset, if the clouds are right, at the angle of the sun, we have a display that gives us a sense of awe. The color, the pinks and the apricots and the oranges and the lavenders, it just gives us a sense of awe. Now, is there a scientific explanation for each of these things? Yes. Yeah. But if we focus totally on the rational explanation, we miss the magic of it. We miss the magic. So we want to have that experience of wonder. I'm going to open to wonder. All right, so the second way that I have for you to open to this experience is exploring the silence within the silence. Silence within the silence. In the stillness and the quiet, a door opens. A door can open. In Jewish mysticism, it's written, the truth that can be spoken is not the ultimate truth. Ultimate truth is wordless, the silence within the silence. More than the absence of speech, more than the absence of words, ultimate truth is this seamless being in place that comes with attending to reality. Reality with a capital R. So how do we get to that silence within the silence? Stop talking, for one. Just kidding. But, we can all get more comfortable with the silence. We can all, transcend that need that we have to fill every moment with sound and words and noise. So just observe. Observe in your own life, in your everyday life, how you are with this. Do you have the TV on in the background, all the time, or the radio on in the background? Like you're not really listening to it, it's just kind of noise. Music is tricky because sometimes it's distracting and sometimes it enhances the moment. So just ask yourself, when I turn it all off, is it too quiet? Ram Dass once said that we're fascinated by words, but where we meet is in the silence behind the words. That's where we meet, in the silence behind the words. I go out I take my dog for a walk where we live, and there's a lot of nature, or sometimes when I'm walking here or in the trails here, I see people out walking with the earbuds in. And, they're either listening to music or a podcast, I don't know. And I just kind of chuckle to myself thinking, you've chosen to be outside. You're not like on a treadmill or on a bike. You've chosen to be outside. Do you not want to hear the birds singing and feel the leaves crunching underneath your feet and be aware of the trees and the wildlife all around you? I don't know. It's my judgment. It's all fine. But we want to look for opportunities to be, in the present moment and open to that connection, that oneness with creation as much as we can. And in whatever way you do that, right? And I know you all have your own practices that you're working with, right? Either the meditation or contemplative prayer, or maybe walking in our outdoor sacred spaces, or just being in nature. For some it's yoga, for some it's chanting. For me, it was chanting Om that kind of opened that door for me. Whatever it is for you, you just want to find something that gets you to the stillness, to the quiet, and opens you to the possibilities, right? The possibilities that are there. Okay, so the third way that we can think about opening the door is breath work. Now, this is not my area of expertise, I'll tell you that right now. But I know it works because in my 20s, I dated a guy who was in the Self-Realization Fellowship, and you guys familiar with Self-Realization Fellowship? Some of you. I'll explain it later. But it's an Eastern mystical thing, and long meditations and Kriya Yoga. So I would do practices with him, and these Kriya Yoga, the deep, really rapid breaths, that gives you this euphoric feeling. Now, I understand physiologically it's because all of the oxygen is rushing to the brain, right? Yes, of course. But there is this, it helps you clarify to kind of go beyond, your body. I know that there are people in this community that work on this. I think Carmelo and Sharon, they're not here today, but I think they do retreats on breath work. I know Oswaldo, if you work with his shamanic work, he has you breathing deeper than you've ever breathed before, than you ever really thought you could. So if this speaks to you, this aspect, does anybody else do breath work or know of people who do? Oh, okay, yeah. Then do you find it clarifying and healing and opening a sense of Sufi breath practice, yeah. It really can open things up, right? So there's many ways to do it. Next week, we're going to be talking about the essential aspect of surrender. Surrender, how to do that, right? So come on back next week for the exploration of surrender. In the meantime, think about these things, in your practices and the way that you're thinking about it, your languaging of what we're about here, what we're doing here. It all can be, an important growth process. All right, namaste.